Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast, the business of cybersecurity. I'm Brian Horning, joined by Randy Bryan and Reginald Andre. What's up, gentlemen? How are we?
Doing well. Good morning.
We didn't talk about the weather, man.
I know.
The weather. Oh, it's hot here, man. It's 85. That's not too hot for Florida.
No, that's hot in South Florida, man, because it's 109% humidity. So
yeah.
It's like being in a sauna. Oh, no, that's good. It's still cool over here, man. We got one of those springs with a lot of rain and a lot of cool air, and people probably thinking summer ain't going to be hot this year, but I guarantee you, just wait a week.
All right, guys, this week we're going to talk about 3 stories that all come back to the same question. Who's actually defending your business, and how do you act when the rules of that defense are changing? So I'm going to lead off with a piece from a bunch of places, but I'm referencing an Axios story about CISA, which is our cybersecurity wing of our federal government, if you don't know what CISA is. And they're being pulled back to an alarming rate. And what I view as the FBI stepping forward as our nation's leader in the cybersecurity kind of megaphone that's out there. And I'll kind of explain why in my segment today. And Randy, you're going to talk about a vendor breach inside the immigration legal world that exposes more than 143,000 people's private information. And Andre, you're going to close us out with a fresh data drop from our favorite group, the Shiny Hunters. They seem to be winning just like the stock market these days. And they had a big one. You're going to let us know who that is, a convenience store chain we probably all frequented at some point in our life. So let's get into it. So, guys, I want to talk about what's going on over at, I got to change the screen here. Sorry. I want to talk about the what's going on in our federal government, guys, and what's happening over at CISA, because according to reports, guys, CISA has lost roughly 1/3 of its staff since the start of 2025, and that's over 1,000 people. The proposed FY27 budget, they would cut another $707 million and up to 766 more positions on top of that. So it really seems with this administration that it's time for CISA to take a back seat for whatever reason. A lot of senators, people on different committees like the Senate Homeland Security Committee called it the starving of CISA personnel, resources, and leadership, and what many are calling a high-stakes environment with AI. So here's the one that surprised me, guys. CISA was actually left out of the initial rollout of Anthropic's Mythos AI model to federal agencies in April, and that wasn't their decision. That was an administration decision. So other agencies like the FBI got access, but yet CISA did not. May 21st, the FBI, not CISA, issued a major public warning about a phishing kit called Kali 365 that's now hijacking Microsoft 365 accounts. That used to be CISA's lane, guys, and it seems like the center of gravity has moved, right? And a couple other things that I want to point out that have changed in, say, the last 18 months. One of those is that the FBI launched Operation Winter Shield specifically to position industry as critical allies alongside the FBI. So the FBI, in my opinion, guys, is now actively trying to be the first call, not CISA. So if your incident response plan still says call CISA, it might be worth updating that or taking a look at who you should be calling these days, because you might be calling an office that can't help you, where if you call maybe the FBI, they might help you. What are your thoughts, guys?
Okay, so I have a few thoughts with this. If it's a matter of these, well, they're saying they're laying these people off or buying them out. So they're not necessarily just, hey, we're transferring you to this department over at the FBI. If it was a matter of we're just making this department under the FBI, I would be like, okay, they're just restructuring. But if it's a matter of we're taking like the core responsibility of the CISA, we're having the FBI handle it, but because their hands are in so many places, at the end of the day, what that tells me is, and what that reiterates, is that businesses need to not depend on the government to help them out through situations and to help them through these type of attacks. But I do think that it is the government's responsibility on these nationwide type of attacks to assist, its citizens, in the sense of like, either taking them down, investigating, but again, reiterating that businesses can no longer, if I don't think they were to begin with, but this is just another wake up call that you can't rely on the government, that they're protecting you from these nation attacks.
I agree with what you're saying there. I think that's a policy stance more than you got to think this way, right? I think that's this administration's policy, is that they want businesses to deal with cybersecurity on their own. The government's got enough to worry about protecting themselves. We can't be trying to foot the bill and make sure that we're also protecting all businesses the way that CISA is doing it kind of today, right? With things like free risk assessment, stuff like that can be done by the private sector. I don't think from what I see, the current administration is not abandoning CISA. They're saying what I just said. They're saying, like, look, we'll still do the database of CVEs and we'll still maintain that, and there'll still be a collective way to kind of communicate some of this stuff. And there's the value of this program, this organization. But when it comes to helping your business doing the things that you can either do on your own or hire a third-party company to do, the government needs to stop kind of stepping in there. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So y'all both have really great points, and I totally agree. We have this saying, you're not too small to get hacked. You're just too small to make the news. Well, we can add a corollary to that. You're not too small to get hacked. You're just too small to get your phone answered by the FBI when you call, because this is not really new for the FBI. The FBI has been involved in different attacks, but every FBI office, from what I understand and what I've heard from FBI agents publicly, every FBI office has a cutoff range. And you might be in like a really small office, and maybe the cutoff size of the crime where they'll jump in might be 200K. Or I heard from an FBI guy live at a presentation a couple years ago. He said in New York, it's $2 million. If the crime doesn't involve more than $2 million, they're not going to step in. And that's just to add to your points, y'all. Business owners out there, we can't be relying on government to step in to help us. What we need is a good, solid cybersecurity plan based on standards that CISA recommends, that the FBI recommends, like a NIST cybersecurity framework or something similar. We need a nice, solid framework like that, and we need good cybersecurity insurance that can step in if something goes awry, because it's no plan is 100% foolproof, and you need to be prepared. So you want to have a good cybersecurity insurance to go along with it, and those things work hand in hand: a good cybersecurity framework and good cybersecurity insurance. And then you won't need to call the government if something happens. Maybe you're calling the government just to let them know, so they can be aware, but not relying on them to step in, because like both of y'all said, most likely they're not going to be available.
Good.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I know Ronald Reagan famously said, the worst word somebody can hear is, "I'm from the government. I'm here to help."
I'm here to help. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just a reminder again that it is your responsibility. And we talked about risk. We always talk about that risk sandwich, right? And now that risk is now just going way, way more to that business owner or that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, as backed up by our friends over at MSSP Alert. I read an article over there, I remember earlier this year, where they were saying that because of these changes in policy, MSPs, MSSPs, companies like ours are seeing more demand because federal partnerships at CISA are at a standstill, right? So all of these companies that maybe thought they would get help from CISA for things like CMMC compliance, things like that, they're not getting that help anymore for free or low cost. So they are starting to see companies come to them for things like vulnerability scans, threat briefs that used to come from CISA. You're going to have to start thinking about finding a vendor and paying a vendor for that instead of getting it from CISA, because it's probably going to not happen in the very near future anymore. If you think it's coming back, if it already stopped, it's probably not coming back at this point. So, all right, guys, any last thoughts before we move on?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, so here we go.
Oh, I do actually. Remember, sorry, I know I do that all the time, but I remember maybe last year, maybe even 2 years ago, especially with the new administration, they're always trying to make things go to the state level, right? They're like, hey, the federal government's hand shouldn't be in this. So this is just also another way. And we've seen where now states are helping, the state's national cyber division or whatever, that they've been helping businesses in their state. So that may be something where we start to see more states, not to say I'm okay with this, but more states kind of picking up the slack of whatever the federal government isn't doing and saying, if you did get hacked and you're, part of our, in our state, you can call us and we'll give you some resources.
Good point. Good point. All right. DocketWise breach hits 143 million immigration clients. Randy, what's going on here?
All right. Well, so this company called DocketWise, basically what they are is a legal platform. So lawyers use this for cases and information and files and all that jazz. And so basically what happened was in the process of onboarding clients, they're going through this ingestion phase of the data. Wow. So we're on a new platform today, y'all. We're just trying to get it figured out here. I'll try not to look at it and get distracted. But so anyway, when DocketWise takes on a new client, they're basically they go through an ingestion phase, just like any client does. And basically during this phase, the data from the new client is dumped into like a third-party folder. I'm not going to go in too much into the details, but the data was getting dumped there unencrypted. And so basically, in the process of moving to what probably is a decently secure platform, your data is going through a third party has your data unencrypted. And apparently, you only need to log in to these intermediate folders with a username and password. It didn't require MFA. Short story long, somebody got in last year. Y'all, I think this was around December of 2025. The investigation took almost 6 months, and they just started notifying people, I guess, within like the last 30 days. But short story long, bad guys get into these unencrypted folders, and they started pulling out the data. They were able to get the data of over 143,000 people and throw it out there. And y'all, this may sound like just like another oh, this is just a dumb little, mistake somebody made or whatever. But it really brings a few things to our attention that we need to be aware of. One, you're never as strong as your weakest link. We all know that. And so DocketWise, let's just start with them in this process, going through a third party that obviously didn't require MFA, didn't have the data encrypted, and somebody just got a username and password off the internet, is what it sounds like, was able to log in. They didn't have to do like a fancy AI generated phishing scam, or some malware that took advantage of 109 vulnerabilities that only AI could find, not a bunch of geniuses sitting in a tower somewhere. Like, they just needed a username and password. So underscores the importance. If you're a SaaS provider, software as a service, that's what DocketWise is. Your whole chain has to be secure. If you are a business owner using a software like this, we rely on stuff like that. I can't even think about, well, I can think about it. I don't even know what's going to happen here with the lawyers that are involved here, how they're going to defend this, what's going to happen here, because basically their client's data was exposed, and ultimately at the end of the day, they are responsible for it. And then the other reason that this really caught my mind, y'all, is because we're in the age of vibe coding. And what that is, if you don't know already, I know the two guys on the show know, but if you're listening, vibe coding is when somebody sits down with Claude Code or ChatGPT Codex or something similar and says, hey, I need an app to do this or that. And these are the kind of things, I know this wasn't necessarily a vibe coding incident, but these are the kind of things that happen if you're not careful when you're doing your vibe coding, is that you could leave entire folders, entire databases, or whatever can be unsecure and just be out there. So I'm not going to really go into that, but the bottom line there would just be to just be careful. Love to hear your guys' thoughts on this particular breach of data, which is going to cost a lot of people a lot of money.
No, this just highlights how the cybersecurity model is shifting, because before we were always just talking about, we got to protect the endpoints, protect the castle, right? Everybody's working from home now. Now you have a lot of more SaaS applications, and all of these, you have the APIs, you have the cloud integrations, you have different vendors that says, hey, we need access to this data. And that's now the new cybersecurity front. It's not necessarily getting into the computer anymore. It's getting into, it's using the trusted applications that have access to your data to now be able to break into your system. So we're definitely going to see more of that, just like what Randy was saying. Then the bad guys are going to use, AI to say, hey, I have this scenario and help me break in or find a flaw. And then they use that, and then boom, they're in, and that's how it happens.
Randy, you kind of touched on it. You asked the question. You're like, I can't imagine what the lawyers are gonna go through. But as of a few years ago, there's rules that require lawyers to actually actively monitor vendor security. So you can't just trust the vendor's brand because you thought they had a reputable name or they've been around for a while, right? So where we're at is every immigration firm that used DocketWise now potentially has its own notification duty. Like we talked about this in those school breaches, right? Like, should the vendor help them with that notification, or do you put it on all the lawyers, like Power Schools did, and the other one that happened last month, right, where they put it on the districts to notify everybody, right? Lawyers have their own notification duty. DocketWise doesn't really have to help you, right? You also have your own malpractice exposure as a result of it, and you're going to have to deal with your own client lawsuits, as I've already found that at least 5 firms already investigating claims, and federal lawsuits have been filed in Texas. That's what this stuff looks like in 2026, guys.
We've started saying it the last few weeks or maybe a month or so. But I think from a digital standpoint and from a legal standpoint, that companies' data is quickly becoming everybody's biggest liability. Maybe it's not there yet, but because of this, like the 5 lawyers you mentioned, because of other people involved in this, that they're now going to be open to lawsuits and all kinds of, potential fines. And what thing out there causes them more exposure to liability than data? It's quickly becoming our biggest risk out there.
Yeah, it is. And good.
No, I was going to say, and it's happening to smaller companies like DocketWise, and we're seeing Salesforce, which is going to be a little of my next article. So it doesn't matter how small the company is or how, Fortune 50 the company is.
Right. So here's the moral of the story. If you own a business, if you're a business owner, you work in a business, you're an IT person, IT manager that runs a SaaS platform with sensitive customer data in it, you have to be starting to look at this situation and look at what you really need to inspect or what you need to know when you purchase these platforms, right? Because this is a situation where production data got cloned into a developer environment. You're going to want to know if your data is being cloned for some other purpose, right? I think everybody thinks like, I buy my own little piece of the pie. All my data gets put in there, gets secured, it gets encrypted, it stays in that little bubble. Well, we just learned in this story that that's not really what happens in the real world. And businesses need to understand that they hold the bag when companies decide to operate this way. It's not right. They should have never operated their business in this way from my standpoint. Like, you don't take legitimate customer data, at least without permission, to put it into a production environment like that. Explicit permission, I would say. And that's going to get played out in court, right? And this is the world that everybody has to understand you're living in when it comes to technology. So take heed with AI. Again, this stuff has only existed for 20 years. We're still in figure it out as we go mode. And this is a prime example of figure it out as we go, right? So lawyers are going to hash it out in courtrooms, and software companies are going to have to behave better as a result of it.
Yep.
All right, guys, let's move right along. So Mr. Andre wants to talk about 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven confirming a Shiny Hunters breach, 185,000. What's happening here, Andre?
Yeah, so 7-Eleven, which is obviously the company that is on the quarter of most of America, selling all of the convenience store and gas stations. They have franchise owners and people that want to become franchise owners of 7-Eleven, and they have to provide documents, names, address, social security number, financial records, contracts, and all those type of things. And they announced that on April 8th of this year, there was a breach, and all of this sensitive franchise, application data that was provided to them is now exposed. And we can thank our I was going to say our friends, but we can thank Shiny Hunters for this, which claimed the responsibility. And this again goes back to that Salesforce, right? So was it 7-Eleven per se, where 7-Eleven's data got breached? No, it was basically something even bigger that they couldn't control outside of not using Salesforce, right? Which is kind of impossible for these type of companies. And this now again points the finger back to everything we've been talking about, where your data, you're storing it in a third-party company. You think it's Salesforce, it must be secure. They're $1 billion company, they'll handle it. But now we find ourselves with these franchise owners where they're listing it it's actually not a lot of money. They're listing it for $250,000. So, but however, 7-Eleven is allegedly refusing to pay the ransom. So that's an interesting business decision there, right? You have your people that want to invest in you for $250,000, and you're not willing to pay that so that their data is not out there. Another thing, let's just see if I had another. Yeah, that was kind of the gist of it. Yeah, that was the gist of it.
Well, so what I'm concerned about here, like, to me, the number of people is not the big deal. I mean, that obviously that matters, but it's the fact that these are people that have applied, potentially, if my understanding, either they've applied or they are franchise owners. And so that maybe that's already publicly available. I don't know. And maybe that's why they're only asking for 250,000 for it. But you literally are getting a list of high net worth individuals that are probably not risk averse. You know, like, you could build out a whole profile. Like, what is a 7-Eleven owner that the bad guys could use to, you know, then target attacks on these particular people. And I mean more like spear phishing, as opposed to, like, you know, and what I mean by that is like micro targeted to these people. So I don't know. For me, that makes it sound like an even bigger deal. And then was this just the American part of 7-Eleven? Because 7-Eleven started here, and then a franchise owner in Japan built it up. It's massively popular in Japan. It is a cultural icon. And then when the one over here started struggling, the one in Japan actually bought the original over here. So the franchise owner in Japan now owns all of it. And is this just confined to the USA, or do we know if it's affecting them worldwide?
No, I'm not sure.
Anyway. The old playbook played out with this group, right? They wanted $250,000 for it. They didn't get it, so they just dumped it all out on their leak site. And here we go, right? So filings in Maine have already affected 2 residents. We're looking at 185,000, it's saying national. So, you know, this is early. There's going to be a lot more that follows, right? So, and here we go with shiny hunters, you know, just to, as I threw it in the comments, this same Salesforce campaign that hit this company has also hit Google, Cisco, Adidas, Qantas, Alliance Life, Farmers Insurance, Workday, Pandora, Chanel, TransUnion, and multiple LVMH brands. So if your business uses Salesforce, guys, the question isn't, could this happen to us? The question is what is our actual exposure today, and how do we limit it? Because you got to look at what this group is doing, how they're getting in, and make sure that you're not doing what other companies are doing. Storing sensitive information in Salesforce, better have that secured pretty good if you're going to be doing that, right? Because quite frankly, Salesforce wasn't really built for that, even though they won't tell you that.
You know, it makes me wonder, Brian, a few years ago, we saw several people come to us that were hacked, but that were in almost like a holding pattern. And it made me start wondering did the hacks, the supply of people hacked, was it bigger than the bad guys could handle? And I'm wondering if this is the case with Salesforce, because when they're getting into the Salesforce of companies like Google and those other ones that you mentioned, it makes me wonder if they're in a lot more than we realize, and they maybe just haven't got you yet. So just to underscore what you already said, if you're using Salesforce at all, especially if it's one of the older versions, you're not using multi-factor, or you don't even have multi-factor, high possibility somebody's already got in there. Like, you really need to consider that.
Right. And just so it's clear too, because Salesforce, they're responsible for more of the infrastructure, the platform security as a whole. But at the end of the day, if you are using Salesforce, just like if you are using Microsoft or Google Workspace, you are still responsible in then configuring the MFA enforcement, the permissions, the connected apps, and things like that. So, so there could have been something that may have been recommended by Salesforce, a best practice that for whatever reason these companies just decided not to do, and then and now this is where they are. So,
and it makes me wonder if it's an on-prem or self-hosted style Salesforce that's causing a lot of this. I don't know 100%, but that's my gut. What we saw back when Rackspace was hacked a few years ago was the guys down in the Exchange basement didn't want to update Exchange because they thought it would break it. They knew it would break it. And I wonder if that's also happening here, if patches are getting put out or whatever, if they've got the ability, but they're afraid to break it and cause a stir. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I would say you need to update. I just read a report just yesterday that said that vulnerabilities are now the number one. I know it changes all the time, but vulnerabilities are now the number one way that the bad guys are getting in. We need a patch, we need to update. And, I would almost say like consequences be danged. We just need to make it happen and then fix it if it breaks, because of things like this. Might be barking up the wrong tree. We'll see.
Yeah.
We will absolutely see. So 3 stories, same thread. Just a reminder, the federal agency that used to be the first line of business defense is being pulled back, and the FBI seems to be stepping into that role. But they'll only help you if you only know to call them, and they're only going to help you if you're probably pretty important and you're in a lot of trouble. So we also, Brandy, you brought us the DocketWise breach, right? So it showed when a vendor gets compromised through that third party or developer pipeline, the customers and their customers end up holding the bag. So remember that, be aware of it, and start making it part of your assessment process, and make sure that you're only doing business with vendors that handle your sensitive data, that you know exactly what they're doing. That's the moral of the story here. Yes, it seems annoying and tedious, but that's what we have to do today, because that's what cyber criminals are going after. And Andre, you brought us the fact that 7-Eleven showed the world that attack groups have an active, well-documented playbook running against the most common business platform, Salesforce, and they're not slowing down because the federal response seems to be, right? It's a shared lesson for all executives this week. Don't panic, but make sure that you're not making assumptions about what's going on in your business and your third-party relationships. Build these safeguards into your incident response plans and work on them consistently, so you're constantly improving them and thinking about this stuff. Because what do we know, guys? Things always change. Right. And this show constantly keeps people up to date on what's going on in the world, so you can be prepared. Right. Because, in the last 6 months, and we're the first ones on the show that are probably going to be saying this in the cybersecurity world, but I just look at what happens out there and what people do. And at the end of the day, the federal safety net is moving. So your incident response plan needs to move with it. And that's Security Squawk for this week. If you got value out of today's show, please take a visit over at buymeacoffee.com/Security Squawk. Any little bit helps the show, helps every episode. Whether you listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, just take 30 seconds, leave a review wherever you can. It helps somebody find this podcast, and it'll help them understand why it's a worthwhile podcast, why they should listen to it. Reviews are how other business owners find this show. We appreciate the support. That's how we keep it ad-free and sponsor-free. I'm Brian Horning, Randy Bryan, Reginald Andre. We thank you. We'll see everybody next week. Stay safe out there.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.